welcome to episode 6 of Gumbo Life, the podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Colson-Ante, and with us today is Pamela Wood, fundraising and development professional, business consultant, and definitely one of the most interesting people I know. Pam takes us on her journey discovering Cane River and New Orleans and a glimpse into her adventures. Let's get into it. Okay, guys, thanks so much for joining us. I'm super excited today because I have the fabulous Pamela Wood. I told her that all I was thinking about this morning before we got ready to record was adjectives, because you can't say her name without a fantastically fabulous adjective in the front of it. Hi,
Oh.
Pam.
Hey, Tracy, how are you?
I'm fabulous. I'm Pamela Fabulous, actually. Thank you so much for agreeing to be on my podcast and agreeing to do all the things that I normally ask you to do.
Absolutely.
Because you're my friend and
Yeah.
I appreciate it. We were talking about what we were going to talk about, and you said, "Oh, I'm going to tell a story about how I came to know Cane River because everybody thinks it's through Allison." Well, I thought it was through Allison too. I totally did. So set me straight.
Okay, so the interesting thing is in 2001, I acquired the book Cane River by Lolita. Is it Tademy or Tademi? Depends on.
Yeah.
Tademy, right. So, and I was living in Miami, Florida. And so I read the book, was enthralled with it, like obsessed with the book, and put it away. Done. You know, you finish your book, you're like, this has become a part of my soul. Never look back. In 2001, we had 9/11. Everything stopped, literally. And I ended up breaking up in a very long-term relationship. And I decided in Pamela fashion, you know what? I think I'm going to go to Los Angeles. We were living together at that time in Florida. And I was like, yeah, let me go to Los Angeles. I think I can seek my fortune there. I bought a fabulous car, packed it up so well that I could only make left turns across all of America.
It sounds like such a Pamela story.
Yeah, not thinking, but just knowing that you can do this, Pamela. So I created like this Star Trek compartment for me to look out across the country. And when I say I could only make left turns, every time I had to get gas, I had to make sure that the gas station was on the left side of the highway. So I also made myself a promise as I was crossing the country that I would stop everywhere that there was a sign of interest to me. My degree is in history, political science, so I love history. And so America has tons of signs, you know, national treasures that you want to pull off and see. So that was my commitment on driving by myself across this fabulous nation. So I get to Louisiana and I'm coming up, I want to say it's 49, and I see a sign that says Iberville, Cane River. I believe that was what it said, National Historic Site. And I said, it clicked in my mind, like, why do I know Cane River? I'd forgotten I'd read the book, right? And I said, wait a minute, skirt. So I did an inappropriate turn to try and get to Cane River as the sign was pointing out. So I pull off, I start following the signs, and then all of a sudden memory takes over. And I literally realized that I had memorized the map and what she had written in the book about how to get around Iberville and Cane River. And I'm going and going and going. And I'm like, okay, there's a church coming up. And sure enough, there was the church. And I keep going and I'm like, oh, there's a plantation a little bit further up. If I keep going to, sure enough, Melrose Plantation pops up. I did not realize I had literally, you know, taken this book in for real, for real. So I pull off at the plantation, right where there's rows and rows and rows of pecan trees. And I pull in, it's a Sunday. I stop the car, pull in, look up, and I'm just sitting there. And this feeling of just awful sadness overwhelms me. And I start crying. I start crying in my car that I can only see out of the left side of, in the middle of nowhere, from a book that I've read earlier in the year. And I'm like, how did I get here? How in the world did I get here? I hear another car pull in. And it is a family, a white family, mom, dad, 2 kids. And they get out of the car and they are upset that the plantation is closed.
Mm-hmm.
And I am looking at them and I basically lose it. I lose it in my car on this family. And I'm like, Pamela, do not get out of this car. You want to live to see another day. I'm like, how dare they be upset that a plantation is closed? The plantation is supposed to be, and it's just madness in my car, in my Star Trek compartment, yelling at this poor little family that has no idea that there's a Black woman over here about to lose her on them. So then they get in their car, they're like, ugh, they're disgusted. They go on about their business. So anyway, I do the whole tour because I know where everything is on Cane River based on the book. And I'm like, this is amazing. I feel like I know this place, like I belong here. And I like internalize the whole experience. I go and I finally make it to California. I live in LA for like 3 years. I come back to the East Coast, because obviously I didn't make my stardom out there, so you don't know me yet, but I come back to the East Coast. I end up going back into fundraising and consulting for some friends who had a firm in New York who I used to work with. And so I end up being a managing director at that consulting firm. Fast forward, I ended up getting a client, National Urban League. National Urban League at that time had been they had just brought on Mark Morial. Here's where Louisiana gets to play another part in my life. And so I ended up working for Mark for a number of years. He's my client, National Urban League. My team works on, bringing in money for them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they have an annual national meeting every year. And Mark's assistant said to me, you have a connect with Mark. I know in Louisiana, you love Louisiana, blah, blah, blah. Correction, you love New Orleans. Let's make that distinction. We did talk about that. You love New Orleans. Yes, I do love New Orleans. And, the person who I was living with in Florida, also from New Orleans. So that's part of my, kind of tick with New Orleans. So anyway, she said, you know who you should meet? We were at the national meeting. I think it was DC. You should meet a young lady from New Orleans, and I think she's from this place called Cane River. I don't know. You know how New Yorkers are. I don't know. It's someplace, and I was like, okay, sure. And she said, I'm going to introduce you to her. Wait. So she happens to be there at the convention, and she's a makeup artist, and she does Mark's, makeup, his wife, all of them. And she comes down to breakfast the first day, and his assistant is like, oh my God, Pamela, here's Allison. This is who I wanted you to meet. And I said, oh, okay. So she starts talking about, her family being from Cane River. And I was like, you slam the table. Yeah. Oh my God, Cane River, let me tell you, I'm sure she was like, who is this girl? But anyway, after that, we went and hung out at just about every party. And we have been inseparable best friends since that day. And that is how I came to learn about Cane River. Boom.
So I had no idea about any of this story.
Right.
My story that I decided of how you and Allison met was even wrong.
Funny, right?
I am so wrong in all kinds of ways. But then, so you were living in New York then, yes? When you and Allison met?
I think I lost you in some of this.
You were living in New York when you and Allison met?
Let's see. Yes, I was living in New York because I was working for the National Urban League. Yes.
Okay, I even had that part wrong. Okay.
Yeah. So the only way I met her was to be introduced by Mark Morial's assistant. Yeah. And ever since then, we've been bonded at the hip. As a matter of fact, I'm recording this at Allison's house.
That sounds about right. So then Cane River became more than just a place that you stopped and found that called to you, because that's what it did, is it called to you and you found it, but it's become much more than that to you now.
Oh my goodness. Yes, indeed. I mean, like, people now think I'm kind of from Cane River.
I know, so you're like an honorary Cane Riverian. How about that?
Listen, you'll see me in the club, you'll see me at the Walmart, you'll see me just about everywhere. They're like, oh yeah, you're Allison's friend, Yeah, for some reason, Cane River got under my skin, in my blood. And now I just sit on the porch like everybody else, looking at the traffic go by.
You sure do.
And
Just
of course,
all up in with everybody else. You
oh
know
yeah,
more people than me.
I know all the gossip, I know the happenings. That's you get in where you fit in. And I have found another home. I'm one of those people who loves to roam, but I do find certain homes and sit on down.
Yeah, you do. And then we met several years after that, I guess
Yes.
about 7 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago.
I think so. I think so. And as Allison likes to say to other people, she's not your friend. She's my friend.
Yes, I
But
know.
I become everybody's friend.
You have become everybody's friend.
Do I become everybody's friend? Listen, I have to say, meeting you was like, oh, this is a whole nother entity that you have to understand. And I like meeting very interesting people. We're at the point where I've gone to your house and you let me sit in the back of your house for days, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And like a writer, I said, I need to write, Tracy. I need to be alone and write and learn some things about myself. You're like, sure, come and sit in the back of my house. And,
Yeah.
and I would use the boys. I would like, don't we need to go shopping? And the boys would pile in my car and we take the top off and just go driving and shopping. They'd listen to whatever Pam wants to do.
Yeah.
Let's do.
Oh, wait, I lost you.
I'm still here.
Okay.
I'm still here.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So, yeah, I have a tendency to roam and just fit in where I think I belong. I'm an only child. And so you learn to be adaptable and pivot with things you find interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the room in the house Pam is talking about is actually where I record at. It's my office, but the boys still call it Miss Pam's room. So it is just a little quiet space to do creative things in. I don't know. It's something about this room that it works for everybody.
It's a Hobby Lobby with beds.
That's exactly what it is.
Hmm.
That's what
Hmm.
I'm gonna start saying, and not
It's
my office.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like there are so many possibilities when you go in that room because there are so many instruments you can use to become something other than what you are when you walk in.
That's so awesome. I love my room sounds like that. I feel very fancy
Well,
right
that's how
now.
it feels. That's how it feels. Listen, Tracy, you wrote out on a whiteboard for me all of the things that I could be doing with myself in order to create streams of income. We had a long conversation about what I could be doing. So I was at a space where I didn't necessarily have a job in my profession. And I was just, it was a find yourself time, much like 2020, but without all the extra. Um, and so you wrote out on the whiteboard, one thing I remember is you can sell all the things that you know that other people don't know, Pammy. And that's what a lot of people call me, Pammy, for some reason, people who know me.
Hmm.
And I was like, you know what? There are things that I know that others don't know that probably could bring me some income. You're absolutely right. And that stuck with me. It absolutely stuck with me. And I used it over the years.
Hmm. You have, and you are you're creative and you're amazingly talented, and you have such a beautiful way with words. You always have, whether you're speaking them or writing them, and you're super entertaining. But that gave me the opportunity to do what I love the most, which is to kind of help people come up with their master plan and work through their goals and figure out what's the missing piece or what else is there, and kind of everything that's possible, because I'm a glass half full, and I always think that there's so much potential in everything.
Amen.
And I was just like, Pam, do you know do you know what you know? Do
Right.
you have any idea what you know that people don't know? And that was one of the things that mom would tell me all the time. She would say, you know you know you don't know how much you know, because people would ask her all kinds of stuff, and people ask me all kinds of stuff, but she's like, that's valuable. That's what you need to share, and that's what you need to sell. And she's like, because she would always say that. She would always be so surprised that she would just, you assume that because you know how to do something or you know about something that everybody else does too. And
Mhm.
it took her forever to get that through my very thick head and for me to start really thinking and looking at things in a different way. So I just totally stole that from her when I said it to you. So
Oh, listen, and it has benefited me so. I think one of the things I took from that is someone hit me up in my DMs about could I help them with business consulting for a business they wanted to create and grow. And I thought to myself, why would anybody come to me for that? And the reality is I've raised millions for other entities, but I never applied it to myself, which is probably the craziest thing to ever say. But it didn't occur to me to use it uh, on the behest of other people who might be smaller entities, just a single mom struggling or whoever who came to me. So I put it to use. As a matter of fact, one of the ones person who reached out to me this year, she wanted to start her own. I want to say it's like a beauty aesthetic company, and I started working with her in May. And last week, she got a hit from one of the largest supermarkets in New York to put her product in. And we have been doing all of the work literally from May till now. And I literally cried because she followed the steps. And I was stunned by the letter that she got. And I was like, oh my God, it works. I can't believe
and I'm right. I know. That's the thing. And because you do have a way of looking at an idea and making something come from that idea. And
yeah.
you do that with everybody.
Yeah, and the shame on me for not. There's a phrase that says you don't know how beautiful you are to a stranger, and that's exactly how this feels like to me. That it, in your own life, you don't recognize who you are to others and what you can be giving to others because to you it's just it's what I do all the time.
Mhm.
It's there's no specialness to it, but the reality is each and every one of us have this specialness that we can impart to others. Whether or not we do it is another thing, and recognizing it is another thing. It's task after task to get to the point to say, oh, this is worthy, I'm worthy, and I can certainly share it with others. So I have to thank you for waking that up in me, and I guess that's your mom waking that up in you. So you
Yeah.
pass, yeah.
And it's just really being the mirror for somebody and saying,
Mm-hmm.
look at how wonderful and fabulous you are, but look at all the things that you know that are unique,
Mm-hmm.
that you can share with the world and that can, like you said, I mean, it can benefit, it can be income, it can turn around, you can pivot, because that's our favorite word. You
Yes, pivot.
can pivot. We randomly yell pivot or text pivot to each other when
Yeah.
things happen or great ideas pop in our head. So, but sometimes that people get stuck and don't realize that there is a spot in life where you can make a U-turn or you can make a only left turn and pivot and go towards something different.
Tracy, you know what I say to people, and this was before I started intaking what you were saying. I say to people all the time, listen, you are going to live and die many times in this one single life. And so the onus is on you when you get that next life to not only inform yourself that this is new, you have to inform those around you that that old person has also passed away and this is the new you. And so in pivoting, that's exactly what happens. You've got to be able to go, okay, that's dead. This is new. I've got to embrace that and move through it. And the expectation is that you also have your arms open to embracing what's new with other people who you've known in one form or another. And you're like, oh, I've got to pivot with them too, as they're pivoting. It's this constant churn.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
exactly. And I think one of the other things, and I'm just thinking about you and the things that you've done that I'm like, ooh, wow. And, you are, like I said, when you were telling your story about packing up and moving to LA, that's like, this is such a Pamela story, because that is the thing about you, is that to me, you're like one of the bravest people I know, because you will just say, I'm leaving now, and go on a trip to another country, or, just totally start something new that I'd be terrified to do. But that was one of the things that mom loved so much, is when you would travel, because you would take us on vacation with you. Thank you.
You're
Um,
welcome.
through your social media. But you had posted a picture one time, and you're sitting in the airport, and it was just your feet and your luggage, and you kind of just were like, I'm going on a trip, but nobody really knew where you were going. And I remember mom called me. She's like, Pamela's at the airport. Where is she going? And I said, I don't know. I have no idea. She's like, yes, you do. I said, no, I don't. She's going on some adventure, and you have gone on the coolest adventures, but you do. So, if, I'm fortunate enough to be your Facebook friend and to see all the places that you've gone, the things that you do. But that was one of the things I know everybody would say was, you're going by yourself? How could you be going somewhere alone? And I'm like, she's never alone. She makes friends everywhere.
You know what's interesting is that, and I'll tell you how I came about the travel bug. My mother would take me all over the world as a child, from 8 on. First of all, I used to fly by myself as a child from 6 to 7, and just go to North Carolina to visit my grandma and my grandpa. And my mother would put me on the plane with, my badge and my faux wings on Piedmont Airlines, if anybody remembers Piedmont Airlines. But yeah, my mom would be like, you know what, we're going to Paris. And I know I was 9 or 10, 9 when we went to Paris, Germany, the Netherlands, Switzerland. I remember in Switzerland, someone came up to me and touched my head. This is as a child, touched my head. We had plaits back then, plaits and cornrows. And they were like, was ist das? This whole, was ist das? And my mother was like, they're called cornrows, don't touch her head. But I would literally have my mother buy me, when we land, Disney had these books that were in any language, and they would teach you the language of where you were, right? So I would be carrying around these huge, big, colorful books from Disney that would tell you your numbers, and I would end up ordering the food for us, because I'd be like, I know Coca-Cola. And my mother would be like, look at this mess. Who is this child? At some point, my mother would be like, just go on and do the ordering, because I can't be bothered. But I have an affinity for languages, and I loved studying languages. And so now when I go places, I'm just like, I throw myself in, and I'm all in. And sometimes I don't know where I'm going. Your mother is absolutely right. And you were right to tell her, you have no idea where I'm going, because sometimes I don't know where I'm going. And so I'll buy a ticket I bought a ticket to Nice, the last trip. And then I said, I want to go to all the surrounding countries if I can, because I know that Eurorail is inexpensive,
Yeah.
So I would hop a train and just be like, I want to go to Milan. Oh, it's $38? Bet. I'm on my way to Milan, But on that particular trip, I would just take pictures of my feet or take pictures of my cart and say, guess where I am? And everybody be like, just hitting in guesses on Facebook on where I was. But it's all of life is an adventure. And I really believe the world belongs to all of us. And it is dishonorable to God if we do not take notice, like they say in The Color Purple, of the color purple. It's our responsibility. And so I just love to explore and haven't stopped exploring. But this darn COVID is keeping me down. My soul is crushed right now.
I know. I'm so tired of being in. And I'm equally as tired of you being in, because like I said, I mean, your trips and your adventures you share, and it really makes you feel like you're there with you. And especially if anybody's met you for one time, just one time, that's all it takes.
That's all it takes.
That's all it takes. And then it really feels like you're traveling with you and you're on this adventure. And it would be so exciting to wake up the next morning to see what you had posted. And then mom would call me again, and I'm like, Mom, please leave her alone.
But let me tell you a story about your mom. You introduced me, but what was interesting is that she and I would have our own time. I don't know if you noticed that,
Yep.
where and you're good to just walk away. Just you go and do your thing, and I would sit and talk to her. And the one thing I can say about your mom was that she recognizes who you are. Is that a way to say that?
Yeah.
Like she literally intakes your being, so that first of all, you're in a presence. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
She could be anywhere in the room, and I know I have that same effect. I can be in any room and people will come over. They might be hesitant, but they will come over and be like a little intimidated, but they want to know, who is this being, And she had that about her, that aura about her. And I remember the first time I met her, I said to Allison, something about Miss Jeanette. And Allison goes, I know, right? And I go, mm-hmm. But I tell you, every time she would sit me down, she'd be like, sit. Of course, she would listen.
Yeah.
So, Pamela, and you could tell she's examining you, So, and she wasn't a woman of massive words or anything. She was to the point, And I would just go, okay, Miss Jeanette. And she'd just be like, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. She'd look over her glasses. Mm-hmm. And Pamela, and she'd say whatever. And I'd be like, you're right. I know. And of course, I feel myself very fortunate that I was there towards, the end, and I got a chance to go and visit with her. And she was telling me about how you all were fussing. She didn't like that, right? Or she made it plain that she didn't want to be fussed over. And she said, Pamela, won't give me a minute's rest. And she's looking at me, talking mad about you all while y'all are maybe 5 feet away.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. She's like, they won't leave me alone. One is here at this hour. One is here at the next hour. One is here. I said, they care about you. That's what she gave me.
She was trying to get rescued. She was trying to plot with you, like, get me out of here.
Right. But I was like, no, I know you need to be right here. She's just like, and just huffing and puffing. And I'm like, it's all, tell me other things. What else is happening with you? And she would, just tell me little things, but she'd be right back with, when are they leaving, Pamela? I'm like, I don't know, Miss Jeanette. I don't know.
I know. She was always trying to put us out. But Mom was just like that though. I say they, my aunts and uncles, they have to have their quiet time. And I'm that way too. Like I crave quiet and silence, and she was the same way. So I would, she had scheduled her quiet time with us, and we could not come over or be or be around. She finally had to make a schedule, and she would text us and tell us, leave me alone. And so we couldn't bother her during the required quiet time.
There's peace in that aloneness. As an only child, I spend an inordinate amount of time alone and don't necessarily need to be around or with people. And I don't think people do understand that and how precious that is. So I totally got her. Listen, even when I come and visit Allison, I consider myself like a cat on the couch. Don't disturb me. We'll be good. I'm looking at TV. I might, say something that's hilarious and you all can join in. But the reality is just let me sit here.
You are like a cat on the couch.
Yeah, I'm very much like a, and you don't know if you can pet me, if you can talk to me. Yeah.
Nope, you're absolutely right. I like that one.
Yeah.
She's like a cat on the couch.
I am like the cat on the couch. Oh my goodness. But yes, so you have to be willing to expand your horizons in order to meet all the wonderful people that you're supposed to meet.
Mm-hmm.
I think of how the book Cane River propelled me. Now I have a whole nother family.
Yeah.
Just from a book, and it's startling to me that just wonderful things come to you if you have your hands open. A lot of us spend a lot of time with our fists clenched, trying to hold on to things that might not necessarily serve us anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not until you release your hand that what's supposed to come to you will come to you.
You're right. You're right. And I still can't believe that I didn't know that that was how that you had come here pre
Mm-hmm.
Allison. But, a lot of people, even with the work that mom did, felt like they had to make that journey to Cane River, that was their Mecca. They had to just go and be there in that space and on that land and exist in it in a different type of way. And you felt the same way. And it's always interesting to me when people that it was something they read or some piece of work that mom had put out or something that they heard and that just draws them to that place.
Well,
And
I'm sorry, I was going to say something in us as people of color in America, and I use POC as opposed to Black, only because there are so many of us with so many different roots, whether it's Native American, Black, there's this lack of knowing where we are from. And King River represents one of the few places that is fully documented in a way that doesn't exist elsewhere. And so to see it in real life, in real time, it's mind blowing,
yeah, you're right. You're right. And I guess that's what makes it different.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, um, one of the things that, my mom is not from there. My mom is originally from LA and, was born and raised there. She didn't move to Natchitoches until after her and my dad got married. And that's a whole nother story with how they met and got married. But, so she had to make it home for her too. And was just so, she growing up, she heard about it, even in LA, because there was such a large Creole community and so many people from Cane River, from Clucherville, from Natchitoches that had migrated out there that, she kind of, it was kind of like you reading the book. She knew about it, but she had never seen it. She had never been. She had just heard stories. So for her to actually come, it was like she felt that everybody needed to know and experience, and that it was important to preserve something that was so unique and to preserve those stories and the culture. And that was really how she got started with the work that she did, was through the genealogy, which kind of slowly morphed into the Creole Center and her running that. And then when we met, I was working at the Creole Center at the time and trying to figure out how to keep it sustainable. And, that was not that long after we had got the letter that we had to become self-sustaining by, I forget what the date was, but it was like 3 days later. It was something crazy. And I was talking to Allison and she was, how she does. Oh, I got somebody you need to meet. And that was the first conversation that we had, was about development and fundraising, because you are the guru. I mean, you touched on it a little bit, but you literally have raised millions and millions of dollars, and you've done some significant work in philanthropy for a long time. And you gave me a lot of great advice, and you've always given me a lot of great advice, because I, work in fundraising and development now too. And you already know that right now it is unbelievably difficult to try to raise money during this time of COVID, and you can't have events and you can't go see people, and people are sick of being on the Zoom call, and it's just totally changed what our work is.
Mm-hmm. It totally has flipped it upside down. And now you've got to rethink on how you reach out to people. And because everyone is on a struggle bus, should I say, a struggle bus of emotions about loss. And it's not just loss of people, it's loss of time, loss of contact, there's just such high amounts of loss across the board for people. And to ask people to extend themselves in such a way to help others is a difficult ask. It's a difficult thing at this time. in focusing, just focusing, not just on what your family has to do, but what others have to do to sustain their family, has really put philanthropy in a space that it's never been seen before, you know?
Right.
And so I can imagine that the struggle, I don't have to imagine, the struggle is absolutely real in how we make it, you know? And I would ask you, what things are you trying to turn around for yourself and your organization? How are you interacting with your people? This virtual world is being massively hard on what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a lot of it has just been being as personal as possible. I think that, there's things that we're doing differently, but they're not nothing new. You know what I mean? It's the old way of doing stuff, but it's literally just, not relying so much on email, on social media, on Zoom calls, but just picking up the phone and just telling a story and saying, listen, this is where we're at and this is the work that we're doing. And I really need your support, and just being very kind of blunt and, just, saying, here's the deal,
Right.
and this is what we've done during COVID. This is what, what the foundation has, how we've been able to support our community. And without your support, we're not going to be able to do that anymore. And just really making it very honest and authentic. And I think that to be successful right now, you have to just be kind of, I don't want to say brutally honest, but you have to be very authentic about who you are and how you're serving your community and what you're providing, what solution are you offering to whatever problem it is that your foundation solves or your nonprofit solves. And that's been, kind of across the board, just talking to my other, nonprofit ED friends. It's, what are you doing? Well, what are you doing? And, that's kind of been what's been working for people. It's just making that personal ask, and which is kind of sad that it kind of goes back to, just this has made us COVID has made us communicate differently, I think, and kind of really getting back to just being very open and being very transparent, which we should have already been doing. We should have already been more personal.
But the provision, and I want to say 2020 has created a provision for realness because of the implication of how little time you have.
Right.
And so I don't have time to mince words about my needs in my real life or even at work. So we're very much cut to the chase right now. And I remember I used to be accused of being like too much to the point. I'm being like, okay, you're telling a long story. Just get to the point. What do you need from me?
Right.
I've had many of you wonderful Southerners are like, Pamela, can I at least tell the story? I'm like, yo, what is the point? What do you need? And I think that's what 2020 is telling us. Get to the point.
Right.
Tell the people what you need.
Right. Tell the people what you need, do the things, that's the way, that's how this podcast came to be. It was like, it's time for me to do all the things. Cause my big list of all the things I want to do is called, the title of it is All the Things. So I just figured I'd just start doing them and just see what would happen.
Oh, I love it. You have to do all the things because now this weird construct of time, which isn't truly real, it's just, it's what we created so that we understand how to go through this life. But now that it has upended what we believe to be true, we have to construct how to go through it, right? So how do I make the most of the time that I have here? How do I make these asks count? You can shuffle your feet and make as many long, beautiful emails as you want, but as you said, just pick up the phone.
Right.
At this stage, just pick up the phone and use it for what it really is for, not just being a smartphone, but a phone. We forget that part of it. It's actually a phone.
Mm-hmm. Like for conversation.
So, right, conversation. Do you remember when we had conversations?
I do remember we
Gosh,
used to have conversations, and that was the only thing that you could have. That's what me and Allison talked about was
right.
the party line that they used to have down on the river, and that was, when multiple people would be on the phone at the same time and you could kind of pick up and, pop in on different conversations. But it's like we don't have conversations anymore. And we text and we, message people on social media and we send out beautiful emails. I am like bad about that. I will send you an email with all kinds of pictures and floof and fluff, and that's my thing. But we have to have conversations, and not just in work, but like in regular life. Like people need to talk to each other again. That's why I think that's a big reason of why we're in the space that we're in now.
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. Listen, my dad, who is 1938, he was born, so that makes him 82 this year. He called me to say, and he talks to me like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I'm like, watching TV as everybody else is in 2020. And
Yeah.
he's like, and he starts telling me stories, and I know every one of his stories, but I listen because I know he wants to tell them, and he's telling the story about how I laughed at everything as a child. And it reminds me, I literally laugh now. You and I were talking earlier about maintaining your sense of humor. Apparently, I have always had a sense of humor, even as a baby. And I'll tell a real quick story about one time my parents went out for the evening and they left me next door with our neighbor, Miss Rob. And Miss Rob was attempting to put me to bed, and she put a handmade quilt. Now, this is back in 1970, 1969, maybe. And, Black folks were good at quilting. And so she put it on me so that I could go to sleep. And I rose up out of the bed and I said, "Miss Rob, my mother does not put raggedy blankets on me."
Pamela.
Right. I I was 4. And so Miss Rob, in her ever patience, waited for my parents to come home. And she met them at the door and said, "You don't have to take her. She's asleep." But they relayed this story, and my mother's face, just went white. Like, I'm so embarrassed. She said, "Miss Rob, I don't know where she got that word. I've never taught her that word." And my parents laughed about that story to this very day. That, number one, I've always been that way from 4 to whatever I am now. And I've always had a sense of humor to shock people, to whatever. And so I keep that close to the vest that this is me. I've always been this way. So when you have a conversation with me, number one, you're not gonna know what I'm gonna say. It's guaranteed. Even I don't know what I'm saying half the time. It just comes out. And so I am who I am. I was designed this way from the gate. So I'm not making any apologies, but I'm just letting you know. Be aware.
This is what it is. And that is a totally true statement. So you're living in New Orleans now.
Yes.
I was just thinking, I was like, I need to say where she's at now,
Okay.
because it's like so far we've been in Florida, we've been in California, and we've been in New York. So
Yeah.
right now, and you've been in Cane River, but right now you're in New Orleans.
I'm in New Orleans. I came here for a job. I beat 57 other people up for the interview for the chief development officer for a radio station here. And I was laid off 2 years into it. And so, but I've always had an affinity for New Orleans. So my New Orleans connection started back in 98, I want to say, when I came for the third Essence Music Festival, third ever, right? And oh, you're going to like this one. I went downstairs from our hotel on Conti. We were the Prince Conti, myself and my mother. And it was around 11 p.m., 12 midnight, whatever. But I knew New Orleans is not a place you go to bed early. So I walked out to Bourbon Street and stood in front of the Cat's Meow where they had karaoke. Now, I am a karaoke head. Love it. Have loved it for many, many years. But I was watching the folks from outside these double doors, and the young lady was doing a Prince song, and it was awful. And my face must have shown that it was a horrendous rendition, because someone came behind me and said, "Oh my God, she's really effing up that song." whoever it was leaning down over me. And I turned to the right, one of the only times in today's interview that I'll be able to turn to the right. I turned to the right and I look up and there's this stunning man, 6'5". And I looked at him and I was like, oh, she sure is messing up that song. You know the look I gave.
Yeah, I know the look.
Right. So we ended up chatting, walking up and down Bourbon Street the whole night, dancing in and out of clubs or whatever, and having an awesome time. Went back to my hotel, sat in the lobby. He fell asleep with his head in my lap. We're sitting in the lobby. And I'm like, he doesn't know I'm a New Yorker. Like a New Yorker could probably like steal your wallet. You don't fall asleep on a New Yorker. So he pops up at 8 a.m. This is how long this night is. And he's like, do you want to go to breakfast? I'm like, yeah. So we go and walk to breakfast. Now, I know I have not gone back up to that room to tell my mother that I have been on the streets of New Orleans a whole night and not checked back in. So I ran upstairs. She was half asleep. I said, look, I'm going to breakfast. And I ran right out. So as not to give her any time to respond. And went to breakfast with him, hung out. He said, you want to go to my house? We go to his house, meet his mom. This is the same adventure from 11 p.m. This stranger that I start off with 11 p.m. And it is now, I spend time talking to his mom. I meet his brother. We hang out. It's going on 3 p.m. My mother has called me. Where are you? And I'm like, I couldn't explain it if I had the time. So eventually I get back downtown, hang out, go to concerts. I don't get the guy's number. I don't have his number. Oh my God. I bump into him in the Superdome. How is that possible?
No.
The Superdome. Yes, thousands of people. Bump into him. He had my number, had called the hotel for me, spoken to my mother, and she pretended like she didn't know who I was. When I tell you how hot I was behind her almost making me lose my chance. Like, lady, what are you doing? You're blocking. I'm trying to keep the story clean. You're blocking. So long story short, we caught up. We ended up becoming boyfriend and girlfriend for many years. And he's, I've known him, we're still friends for 20 some odd years. But that was the impetus for me in New Orleans and how I fell in love with the city. And it was through him showing me around the city. In fact, that time we went to his house, we got on the streetcar and our seats were not facing each other. He was trying to tell me the names of the streets and everything. And there's a lot of Greek names for the streets here in New Orleans, like Terpsichore and whatever. And I was like, wow, this dude is speaking Greek to me. You know how you think stuff's like so fabulous. And so the streetcar driver stops the streetcar, gets up, and he tells both of us, stand up. He flips the seat so that we are facing one another and he can continue doing the tour for me and telling me about the streets. I was like, New Orleans is amazing. People really care about things and people here,
Yeah.
So my first time in New Orleans was so unbelievably different that I was like, there's no way anyone could not love this city. The people were so kind to me. The men were so fine to me. So that is my first love affair with New Orleans. And I kept coming back. And now I'm here.
And now you're there. Which I was really excited about because around all at that same time that you were coming, I was moving to Opelousas. Richie had finally come from California. We got our house, and then you were only 2 hours away. I think I would say that every time we talked. You're only 2 hours away. I can see you whenever I want, and it was it was a big bonus.
Big bonus.
It was a big bonus.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about what you're doing now, especially with the Center for Third World Organizing. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, what's interesting is 2020 has actually been full of abundance for me. It was unexpected. And so I have a former mentee who I mentored in fundraising and philanthropy, and he gave me a call one day. He's now the head of Will and Jada's foundation out in Los Angeles, and he said, "Listen, there's someone that you and I both know that has some work that might be of interest to you, and I think you really should give her a call." So I gave her a call. She and then turned my resume and bio into what they call C2, and I had an interview with them. And I ended up winning the position of their major gifts director, major gifts officer. And C2 is one of the satellites, I should say, in the Black Lives Matter. They call it the ecosystem, meaning there are several hundred organizations that kind of collectively share information, best practices, and all of that in the Black Lives Matter movement. And so I ended up becoming the major gifts officer for their main satellite, I should say. And my responsibility is to work on developing Black donors, which is an interesting niche because we are not known specifically as as in fundraising as not necessarily donors in the old school way that I am used to. So there's a definite path for philanthropy and donors, but when it comes to Black donors, that's not necessarily laid out in that way. And so it's about cultivating and figuring out how to get this cohort on board with philanthropy. So that's what I'm doing now, sis.
I love that. And we've talked about that before. And, even here specifically with what I'm doing, that's one of the things that I recognize is that we needed to do a much, much better job of cultivating those Black donors and showing them the impact that they could have on not just my foundation, but on other nonprofits in this community. Mm-hmm. And I think it's just, it is a very unique kind of niche and not anything that you're taught how to do. And I think that most of us, it's hard to, nobody can really teach you how to fundraise. You kind of just have to figure out what's the best way for you to do it. And I think it's that unique approach, especially that you have, that's made you so successful in this field.
Yeah. Fundraising traditionally has not been open to Black people, people of color. Right. And I fell in the back door because someone recommended me, when I was living in New York, someone recommended me to one of the larger firms. And he said, "Look, here's my card. Go and see if they'll be interested." And I took the interview. I ended up on a weekend with 27 other people applying to be a consultant in that firm, which was, 99% white males. And a few white females sprinkled in. That was their, affirmative action. And so, and this is back in 98. And so I went on that interview with 27 others, and I was one of 7 hired and literally given a notebook on fundraising and sent into the field to figure it out, literally trial by fire. And I cut my teeth like a lot of other, let me tell you, it was a tough time in that every weekly meeting, someone would disappear from the consulting table, meaning if they weren't hitting their numbers, they got axed, AX, AXED, I'm sorry. And you would come in on Friday shaking, like, okay, I hit my numbers. You're only as good as your last campaign. That was the whole theme there. And I considered them, that firm, the McDonald's of fundraising. You learn by fire, but buddy, when you came out on the other side, no one could mess with you. And I literally cut my eye teeth in large white firms, in senior managing director positions, VP positions, and it's always been me by myself as a woman of color, as a Black person. Usually I'm alone in the room and just doing my thing, trying to raise that money. And so for me to use the information and figure out what my legacy is going forward in fundraising, I had already said I was going to do it in service for my people. And for this to fall into my lap has been, the universe saying, "Kid, here you go. You asked for it, make it happen." And so I'm honored, first of all, to be in service to my people and people of color on this end of the spectrum, and taking the information that I've learned over 20 some odd years in service for large white organizations. and applying it to us. This is going to be an interesting treat for me.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, and this is, we were talking right before I pressed record, and you were saying how unique this time is. And I think the way that I wanted you to just to talk about it again, because I think the way that you said it was so succinct, but very, um, very telling and very true about the time that we're in this year, and all the changes, and the pandemic, and our political climate, and the just on my side, I do a lot of work in community health, and
Mm-hmm.
one of the press conferences that they had, probably May, June, that the state was having, and when the governor would give his press conferences, they talked about social determinants of health. And for them to say, for me to hear social determinants of health on TV was so significant, because it's something that it's one of those things that when you talk about community health, that people don't like to talk about a whole lot, because those social determinants are people that live at or below the poverty line, people that have food insecurity, people that are homeless, people that are, more apt to have hypertension or diabetes, and really starting to address what those core issues are, and what are the things that need to be solved or changed, or what are the policies that need to be put into effect, so that we can impact the social determinants, so that our people are healthier. And to me, it was like, that was such a huge step. I was calling people going, they just said social determinants of health on TV. And nobody else would even think that was that was like some big, huge change, but it was. I mean, it's significant to me, the conversations that are being had, and the direction that we're moving in. But I wanted you to just talk a little bit about this year and how you see it, because I think you always do such a great job of um, putting all of these things together so eloquently, so that we can kind of understand in a different way, and approach what's happening in a different way.
What comes to mind is that we are only as great as the least of us, right? So what you just touched on about how many of us don't have a safety net as whole persons. I think some of us have the privilege and luxury to ruminate and think about what it will take for me as an individual to be whole. And whether that's healthcare, money, and money is tied to all of these things, and how we survive. It comes to bear in this year because the net was pulled out from a vast majority of us, right?
Right.
So this thing of turning the mirror on ourselves happened just so so across the board that it was shocking, and shocking to a lot of us who already were kind of glib about healthcare, glib about how the least of us is living and making it, until we became the least of us.
Yeah.
And how shocking it was about how hard the climb up was going to be, and still is. I'm in a Facebook unemployment group because of just everyone losing employment, never heard of. The fact that people were suddenly faced with, how does unemployment work? The fact that most people didn't know how it actually works, and how much the state would give you, and how shocked they were to their core. Suddenly it became an issue,
Mm-hmm.
and the awakening. It feels like a huge awakening. Like I said earlier about it being that we are in evolutionary and a revolutionary time, and how difficult and painful that is when they happen side by side and within each other. And so we have to decide on how we manage the evolution of how we treat the least of us. We have to go through a revolution to embody and give what the least of us should have already been receiving.
Yeah.
Because, and the funny thing, and tying in Black Lives Matter, the fact that BLM is started by women of color who are the least of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
the squeaky wheel gets that oil, it's because they have to fight because they're from the bottom of this whole pyramid of people in America, well, in the world, I should say. And so the fact that we've got to work through it all together at once, it is a shock to every system. Every system. You've got people in denial. That's our president. You know, to be in denial means you get to keep your privilege. That's the comfort. It's a big old blanket, and God bless, but you know what? The blanket is threadbare, and it is about to disintegrate. And the realization of that has people losing their minds. Now, for those of us who may not be, completely at the bottom, but we know that the come up is happening. It's like the Wiz, Dawning of the New Day. You know that musical number. It's a new day.
Yep.
It feels like it's a new day, and it feels like we refuse to go backwards. And I think that has a lot of people's systems in shock, absolute shock that we are not going backwards. That resolute thing I keep hearing as a theme from people across the board. We are not going back. We can't go back. Everything that we know has been destroyed, literally, and we're sitting in the ruins of it. So how do we build it back up? It's of essence and it's of time, and we don't have the luxury anymore where we could just sit by and be unwoke. The absolute comfort of being unawake is a drug in and of itself.
Yeah.
And the fact that I have to be up every day on pivot, as we've talked about, is the thing that's driving us all crazy. I can't believe I have to be awake to this. We've been numb and quiet for so long, so very long, that you don't get fat overnight. It's going to take some time.
Yeah.
In the awakening. I'm happy for us. I'm sad for us, but I'm more happy than I am sad, because I know that this walk through this storm, this evolution revolution is necessary. It is so very necessary. And everybody keeps saying, I'm tired. I'm so tired. You know why you're so tired? It's because you've been carrying that load for so long. The load of being able to hide your true thoughts from your friends, your neighbors. All of that has been weighing you down, and you're finally free to be like, you know what? Cry 2 tears in a bucket. Here's how I'm feeling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That can tire a soul. Being truthy and truthful can tire a soul because you haven't had to do that work before.
Right.
Your muscle memory doesn't exist for this. That's why you're worn out. There is no memory of this. And so all of this is new to us in dealing and being, our whole selves. And in order for me to be my whole self, I've also got to look back at those who are not able to be their whole selves without my help. Right. That's what fundraising and philanthropy is about. It's responsibility. And if I have to look up ahead at people who are holding us back, that means I got to tear them down so that they understand that this was never built for me in mind. It wasn't built for you in mind. It was only built for a specific part of our nation. And it's never worked. And it's time we all came to agreement on that and rebuild it in a way that fits everybody in. That's the unctuous part, that you've got to be inclusive.
True inclusion.
True inclusion means the least of us get to be at that table.
Yeah.
It's a lot to swallow, sis.
It is. And it's been a rough year, but I think, you're absolutely right in that it's been an awakening. I know everybody's like, oh, I can't wait till this year is over with. I can't wait till it's over with. And I'm like, what do you think is going to change from December 31st to January 1?
Right.
You've got to change your mind, and you've got to be ready to, really participate
or you're going to get left.
Yeah, instead of just, keeping saying, I'll be so glad when this year is over with. It's been a horrible year. Well, you know what? There's every year it's a horrible year for somebody. What's different is that this has been a really hard year for a whole lot of people. And it looks and it feels a lot different than what it's looked and felt like for them before.
Mm-hmm.
And there has been, it's been a lot of loss, and it's a lot of loss, and for not losing people that we love, but also losing, just what you're saying, what we thought we knew. And it's time to do something different. I knew you were going to give me just a awesome answer. I'm so glad I asked you that question. I'm going to ask you one last question that I ask all my guests, and I'm really interested about your answer because you have such a, because you have traveled so much, and you've been exposed to so many cultures and different types of people, and had so many adventures, Pamela adventures. But tell me what your definition of Creole is.
Oh, it is soul stuff. SOUL and SOLE. So, soul stuff drives you there. Whether or not you have that quote unquote lineage, it really doesn't matter to me. It's a culture. It's a culture that I have adopted that has adopted me.
Mm-hmm.
And it has always spoken to my soul, even though I didn't know it was there. There are a lot of things in life that are going to speak to you, that you gravitate to, that will in turn embrace you. And I think that is absolutely what Creole is for me. And soul, SOLE, because your soul, being alone as I am an only child, and I've said that you've got to create who you are, and adding on this love that I have for things that are Creole, the culture, that for me is how you create family. Sometimes the family you're born with isn't necessarily the one you're supposed to stick with.
Right.
For your life,
Mm-hmm.
and you tend to build mothers and fathers. They pop up out of nowhere for me, literally, and I use your mother as important. I felt like I made her, she was a proud parent on some levels,
Absolutely.
That's how she made me feel. And so it's the culture. It's absolutely how the culture feels in your soul. And I'm grateful for it, and I know that there will be more opportunities for me in other cultures that I'll be drawn to. If COVID will let me out of the house.
Well, yeah, that's that's if we can just get out of the house, it'd be great. Hopefully that'll happen soon. I just want to take a minute and just acknowledge you for all the work that you've done, for the way that you have changed the narrative on so many things, but also just for being such a wonderful, beautiful friend, and always listening, having such great advice for me and for everybody that's close to Pammy. Thank you for taking us on your adventures all of the time, and for sharing the way that you share on Facebook, because it's always so very entertaining and honest. But I appreciate you so much, and I appreciate you doing this with me. If people want to contact you or find out some more about you, what should they do?
They can hit me up on Facebook. I am Pamela Wood. It's real simple. Or you can hit me up in Gmail, which is Skinny Billionaireess, and I will spell it SKINNY, billion BILLIONARIESS, billionaireess. So at gmail.com. You got a question? I have this thing where people seem to feel that they can just drop in my DMs and ask questions about life. I'm not a life coach, but I actively answer their questions. And so I guess that I might have to add that hat, Tracy, as you say, and just answer the questions.
Yeah, and she is a great consultant. If you guys have this idea that's been tinkering around in your head, and are looking for some true direction. She's awesome at what she does. So please drop her a line, and I will include all of that information in the show notes for you guys. Also in the email that I'll send out. If you haven't gotten on my mailing list, make sure you go to gumbolife.com and sign up for it so you can get all of the new episodes and the goods straight to your inbox. That's the best way. Thank you, Pammy.
Thank you, Tracy. I love you.
I love you too. Thanks so much for hanging out with Pam and I today. We had a great time. It's always fun to talk to her. Like she said at the end, if you have any questions, you're looking for a great business consultant, or want more information, you can find her on Facebook at Pamela Wood, or you can email her at skinnybillionaireess@gmail.com. That's SKINNYBILLIONARIES@gmail.com. Thanks so much, you guys, for listening again. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next week. Shop Gumbo Life for apparel, face masks, phone covers, home goods, and much more at gumbolife.com, in the official Gumbo Life store, and on Amazon. You can find us on Facebook at Gumbo Life, or on Instagram at Gumbo Life Blog. Make sure to tag your Gumbo Life gear, #Gumbo Lifestyle. Music by Cody Cassard. Editing and production by Tracy Ante.